everybody. Welcome to the fourth and final part of our TOEFL preparation course video. Today we're going to do the writing. Very interesting section. I'm going to show you some writing mock tests, because the writing is a very important part of the TOEFL exam. It's an important part of all the English exams. And it's one section, that can often bring the students' marks down, because writing, it's more difficult to express your ideas, and it can be the area where students fall down. So first of all, it is the writing section, the fourth and final part of the TOEFL exam. It's 50 minutes and it consists of two parts: the integrated writing section and the independent. And I'm going to show you an example of both sections. Now, I'd just like to give a couple of little tips on how your students can achieve better marks in the writing. First of all, obviously, quick and accurate typing is a huge advantage. So while they're studying, encourage them to practice quick, accurate typing as well, because these days, most of the tests are computerized, so they do need to type quickly and accurately. There is a lot of time pressure in the writing. Make them aware of that. And as I show you both parts, I will tell you the time allocation for both. But that is one of the biggest problems, is that a lot of students don't finish the writing. They sometimes spend too much time on the first task and then don't finish the second one. The structure and the format of the essay is very important. And when we do the part 2, where particularly the structure and format is important, I will touch on that again. But the correct structure will make a very big difference to their marks. And then obviously things like spelling and grammar, and encourage them to structure the sentences correctly. Also things like compound sentences, complex sentences, varying where different clauses are, the adverbial clause, those variations to make it more interesting. Help them to develop their writing like that. In the writing, it's also important that they have analytical skills. When they look at the writing topic, they must be able to think, what are they actually asking me? Are they asking me about my opinion? Are they asking me advantages, disadvantages? What are they asking me? To actually analyze that and not just jump into the question straight away. So not everybody has an analytical mind, but teach them how to break down that question so that they can see what they're actually being asked. It also, we will touch a bit later on sticking to the topic. If they understand, if they've analyzed the question, then sticking to the topic will be much easier, because that's a very common thing. As I said last week with the speaking, it's very easy to go off topic, and it's the same with the writing. And then once again, as with the other sections, note-taking. When they look at a question, they must make notes, especially in the integrated section, which I will show you in a minute. They must be able to take notes to save time, to get some structure, and to know how to approach the essay. Okay, and a template in that is very, very useful, so that they know exactly where to start, especially when they're anxious. A template can make a very big difference. Okay, so I'm going to show you, first of all, I'm going to show you the section, the integrated task. So 3 minutes to read a passage. After reading, they'll listen to a lecture regarding the same topic, and then only 20 minutes to write a response to a question that asks you about the relationship between the lecture and what you read in the reading passage. So they need to answer the question using the information from the reading passage and the lecture. They must use both of those. As with the speaking last week, they quite often contradict each other between what they've read and what they've heard. There's quite often a contradiction between those opinions. And then in the essay, they need to mention that contradiction. On the one hand, there's that opinion, but on the other hand, there's that. So they must cover both of those opinions. 250 to 300 words, which isn't all that long, but of course it's only 20 minutes. So it's not very much time at all. But it's very important, as I said just now, to take the notes, to start with some sort of starting point, even though it's only 20 minutes. Have a starting point. What are they going to start with once they've given opportunity to start? Okay, so I'm going to show you. Okay, it's quite a long reading passage, actually. And now it's less than 3 minutes. So I'm going to give you a chance so you can see how long it takes to read this little passage. Okay, so obviously during this reading time, they need to be taking notes as well, reading over, checking for key phrases, checking for the main information in this, because as soon as the 3 minutes is up, they will do the listening, okay, which we will go to in a minute. And then it's very important that they know what this information is to compare with the listening. Okay. Good readers should be able to read through this passage a couple of times, but the slow readers will only get through once, maybe 1.5 times.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read about.
Ongoing investigations have shown that predation is the most likely cause of the sea otter decline after all. First, there is a lack of dead sea otters washing up on Alaskan beaches, which is not what you would expect from infections caused by pollution killing them off. However, the fact that dead sea otters are seldom found supports the predator hypothesis. If a predator kills an otter, then it is eaten right away and can't wash up on shore. Second, orcas prefer to hunt whales, but whales have essentially disappeared in that area due to human hunters. Since the whales are not as available, orcas have had to change their diet to what is available. Since it is only smaller sea animals available, the orcas have probably started hunting those more, and created the decline in all of the species mentioned in the passage. And finally, predation is a more likely reason for the uneven pattern of otter decline. Otters in locations that are more accessible to orcas are more likely to be hunted. This is supported by the stable population of otters in shallow rocky locations where orcas can't access.
Summarize the points made in the lecture, being sure to explain how they respond to the specific arguments made in the reading passage.
Okay, so now you see they do have the reading on the left-hand side, so they refer back to the reading in order to write the essay, but they don't have the listening, the auditory. So they need to, that's where note-taking is once again very important, to have written down that information to compare. So only 20 minutes to write that essay. The time, there is a clock on there, as you can see at the top, and that is the time that they will have. It will cut off after 20 minutes. Okay, unlike some of the other English exams like the IELTS, where they can go over their time in the one section and it can take some time of the next section, this will cut off after 20 minutes, and that's as much as it is. Okay, and the structure, obviously the introduction, the body, the argument, the difference in opinion, making sure they cover these question points, summarize the point made in the lecture, and explain how the speaker cast doubt on specific points. So that's what I was saying when it contradicts the reading. So they need to have remembered what the lecturer said and where he cast doubts. Okay, that will be the body, and then there must be a conclusion as well. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the other essay because that's also important in the structure. Okay, this is the independent essay now. So in some ways, it's quite similar to that we did, but in other ways, it's quite different. So for this task, you'll write an essay in response to a question that asks you to state, explain, and support your opinion on an issue. 30 minutes to write an essay, so slightly longer, but it's 350 words. So that's where the slightly longer requirement, slightly more words, and then the spacing of the time here is very important. Help them to plan so that it's 5 minutes of note-taking, 5 minutes of thinking about what they're going to write, and then 5 minutes at the end to check for mistakes. So that's not even a full 30 minutes of writing. That's actually, and it's actually similar with part 1 as well. If you take away the checking time, the planning time, is even the writing actually is very little. So let's say only 20 minutes of actual writing of this essay. And once again, there must be an introduction. There should be 2 body paragraphs of the argument, and then the conclusion. So 4 paragraphs altogether. Okay, so let's look at the topic. Describe a fear you had to overcome. How did you overcome it? So not a bad topic. 350 words is quite a lot to write in that short time, but that introduction is very important. Teach them to catch the reader's attention. Using a question sometimes in the introduction can be quite good, paraphrasing what they're asking in the question. So as an introduction, paraphrase that question, but they mustn't use the same words. They must use their own words, add some vocabulary, perhaps a question, start the essay with quite a bang so that it's interesting to read. And then, as I said just now, 2 paragraphs, and then the conclusion. And the conclusion must really wrap up what they have said up to now. It's not an additional point, it's a wrap-up of the 2 main body paragraphs. Okay. It's also very important when they think about their structure. It's very helpful for them to think of little keywords to help them get started. Like they can say, firstly, I think this, I had this fear. They can say, secondly, furthermore, those transition words to finish, in conclusion, to wrap up. Those sort of phrases and transition words can be very useful. It sort of gives them a stepping stone to help them get started, because that is the biggest thing. Where do I start? How do I come up with so many ideas, or 2 main ideas in a short space of time? If they ask an opinion in the question, that the student can have a couple of different opinions, but cohesion and coherence is very important. As we discussed last week with the speaking, obviously I can have a pro on a topic and a con on a topic. That's absolutely fine, but those ideas must be clear. They mustn't be mishmashed into each other so that the reader doesn't know where the student stands with their opinion. The opinions must be clear, and that's where the paragraphs come in. Something like this, where they're discussing a fear, it's obviously personal, and the student can add a little bit of humor, they can add a very personal touch. If they're asking for something like this, then obviously it's more personal than a complete opinion, advantages, disadvantages type essay. So that's when the analytical skills come in handy, because then they need to think, what kind of essay am I actually writing at? Is it an opinion? Is it personal experience? Is it advantages, disadvantages? And we can have a quick look now at what some of those essay topics are, what kind of topics they will be asked. But as I said just now, the linking, transition, vocabulary, grammar, coherency, fluency, those things are very, very important in writing an essay. The syntax of the sentences. And that's what's going to hold the essay together. Also, a little tip which applies to the speaking as well. The student may use British or American English. Obviously, the TOEFL is American, so perhaps they would more likely use American English, but they may use British English, but they can't mix the American and the British English together. They must either use American or British. And these days, with the world being so international, it's actually quite difficult to remember which is American and which is British. If you think of vocabulary that you use day to day, we mix them together. But try and get them to realize which is American, which is British, and the spelling differences between American and British. Like practice, the word practice, spelling with an S, spelling with a C. They need to be consistent in those sort of things. That's quite important. Okay, so sometimes they will say to you, should I use British? Should I use American? It's not serious as long as it's consistent. Okay, so I'm going to go to the course material quickly before we wrap up. I've covered a lot of this. The raw score will be out of 5. Strangely enough, the raw score is out of 5, and then it will be scaled to a score out of 30. And you can see there what is considered to be a good score, over 24. But the initial essay score will be out of 5. Okay. Let's have a look at the examples of questions. Sorry. So the part 1, a lot summarizing points, mainly made in the lecture, like the example I showed you, explaining how they cast doubt, explain how they challenge specific claims, explain how they answer the problems, explain and specifically explain how they support the explanations. They strengthen the points made in the reading passage. So the part 1 is quite basic in the questions, but it's very important that they see these small details in this wording: cast doubt, challenge, answer the problems, those keywords, specific reasons that they strengthen points made in the reading passage. So the whole time it's between the two. Okay, that's very important. And then question 2, it will be about school, work, or lifestyle, agree or disagree. That's a very, very common one. Paired choice. Would you rather do this or do that? We had some of those last week in the speaking as well. If you could choose this one or that one. Okay, personal preference, or 3 choices. If you could choose between giving a presentation, writing an essay, or having a discussion with your peers, which would you choose if you could choose one of those? And then they have to discuss that. So a writing template, 4 paragraphs, that structure is very important. Okay. The criteria, the point of view clearly stated, as I said, key points must be explained with supporting examples and details. And then in task 1, connecting the reading and the listening and the details from the lecture. And then use of language, the grammar, punctuation, spelling, varying sentence length. So some students, because they get a bit scared of using tenses incorrectly, they stick to basic sentences. They must mix their sentences up so that they are varied and interesting. And once again, good vocabulary, idioms, synonyms, phrasal verbs, all those basic things that we've covered already. Okay, I've covered a lot of information in the half an hour. I hope that it's been helpful. This, as I said at the beginning, this writing can be very tricky. Time pressure is a huge thing, but practice, practice, practice. They need to write as much as they can in order to learn to express their ideas. And the speaking, lots of speaking practice definitely helps them expressing their ideas in the writing as well. So I hope that's useful.